All right. Hey, Jamie, thank you so much for joining me today. I am super pumped to have you here. You are bringing in a completely different side of the whole youth sport ecosystem, and I think you're going to be able to really speak to a different topic than we've had previously. So, can you take a minute, introduce yourself and the organization you work for, and then tell us about your current position?
Sure. Yeah. Well, one, hope it's awesome to be here. Thrilled to connect with you guys and just share more on just the topic of youth sports and how it applies to us in the private equity world. So, real quick, my name is Jamie Lukaszewski. I am, let's see, formerly trained as a CPA. Did a stint in investment banking and have been a CFO throughout my career. Currently, for the past 8 years, I've been at Trivest. Trivest is a middle market private equity fund. We have about $6 billion of assets under management right now, and our focus is really just in that middle market category. For some reason, we've really gravitated toward youth sport recently. So we have two big investments in that space, one being with the Dominique Dawes Gymnastics Academy and the other being with Game One. So happy to get into more of that to dig into those when the time's right. But where I fit in and just working with our companies is my role is director of financial operations, which plain English way of saying that is office of the CFO. So the accounting, business intelligence, cash cost management, all things that roll up to me and work with our 50 portfolio companies on pretty frequently. So a little bit about me and a little bit about TriVest.
That's awesome. So most likely we're talking to a lot of sport based majors out there. So they probably don't know much, if any, about the whole private equity world. So can you tell us a little bit about
Sure.
Trivest and tell us
Yeah.
a little bit even more broadly about what private equity is and how you would explain what you do to someone that doesn't know much about it?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think people have probably come across venture capital and private equity, maybe mix the two up quite a bit. And there's always this question of like, what do they actually do and how does this company actually work? So, just to start background, private equity is its own asset class. We work with limited partners. So think about, major endowments, major pension funds, high net worth individuals. They will contribute money to a fund, right, which is effectively committed capital to the tune of 500 million to $1 billion that we will go out and we will start to invest into private companies on their behalf, right? That in a nutshell is just how the fund structure works. Where private equity is very different than venture is we're looking at investing in any particular fund, maybe making between 10 and 15 investments in companies that have, been around for 10, 15 years, have a really stable customer base, are growing their EBITDA margins, they're profitable and they're established companies. That's going to be very different than venture, where venture is investing in, two people in a garage that have an idea and, want to build some really big tech company. So, very, very different in terms of the flavor of how those two work. We're just going to be a little bit more focused on established companies, in mature industries, and then how we can work together to either create operational improvement or go out and acquire competitors, similar products, similar services, and kind of build them into a bigger business by the time that we're done with it. So yeah, that in a nutshell is it. But happy to go into more detail on what we look for, stuff like that. So you tell me.
Yeah, yeah. So you just finished that off saying by the time we're done with it. So there's this life
Yeah,
cycle of the investment, right? So can you walk us through what it looks like once you invest? How long
sure.
do you normally want to be with a company? And just tell us about the life cycle of any
Yeah.
sort of investment.
Yeah, sure. So within the private equity world, I mentioned how we have like a fund, right? So let's say it's a $500 million fund. The agreement that we have with our investors is, hey, we are going to go out and buy businesses in say like a 3 to 4 year period. okay, that's going to be our investment period. We're, from the time we buy them, we're going to try and build that company in a few different ways. That could be, helping professionalize it, put in new systems, bring in, a new executive management team, just a variety of different ways in how you can build and grow a company. Our typical hold is we really want to be exiting, selling companies to the next owner, I think by year 5 or year 6. So the entire fund life is a 10-year period. So you can imagine some investments we'll buy them immediately, and then we'll sell them, right on time. Some will take a little bit longer, some will take a little bit shorter. And by the end of it, by the end of the goal, starting with that $500 million fund, we want to return a 3x return. What does that mean? That means for every dollar that our investors gave us, we want to give them $3 back. So that 500 million should turn into about 1.5 billion by the time things are all said and done. Just a little bit more specifics. When we, buy a single company, we sell that company, we'll return capital immediately. So we don't hold it for the 10 years and say, hey, all these gains, just wait until we get to the end of the 10 years to give it back. No, we're constantly, either sharing money back to the investors or calling capital to put it to work through those different investment vehicles.
Yeah. So how for the investors that give you the funds, how involved are they during their time of
Yeah.
an investment with that specific company?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So if you really put yourself in the shoes of a limited partner, so you'll hear me say LP. Limited partner is one of those institutional investors. It's one of those people that are giving us, really sizable checks that we can go out, put into the fund and move on and make the investments. They're probably working with a variety of different funds, some in private equity, some in real estate, some in public equities and public assets, right? Like they are not very involved with the operations of an individual company. They made for us, they'll say, hey, can we get a quarterly update? Let's do an annual retreat where we're getting together, hearing how the investments are performing. Like that, just kind of in a nutshell, is how it works. On our end, it is, share as much information, be really clear on how we're making our decisions, and then ultimately, your performance of how we've made those investments is really what tells the full story from it.
Cool. Cool. So tell us a little bit more about Trivest. What's
Sure.
Trivest's investment, not necessarily investment, but maybe like time investment, and
Yeah.
what does Trivest do with the company?
Yeah, no, no, great question. So Trivest is really uniquely positioned, and in our 40-year history, we've really focused on working with family and founder-owned businesses. So think of, a family who's third generation, they've owned a really successful HVAC and plumbing business, and they really just want to find a way to have a clear path on how they can exit the company and kind of move on just from how long it's been in their family and them being the main ones that are responsible for it. So that is our sweet spot. Family founder-owned companies is our sweet spot. We will work with them on a variety of different ways, right? So one is just, hey, let's get that succession plan in place. Maybe you want to sell 80% of the company, hold 20%. That's great. We can give you a path on how you do that. And then it's, how much or how little do you want to be involved? You can imagine there are people, who have started the company, have been running it for 40 years of their professional life, and they're saying, hey, I want to go hang out on a beach with my grandkids, and I would love for you guys to take over the day to day and you deal with all the stresses that come from it. We have seen those before. We can make that plan work really, really well. So there's definitely a path where, we could find that and say, hey, we're a great partner for it. There's also the other side of someone saying, hey, I'm in my mid 30s. I've built a really good business. I just need help. Right? Like I need your guys' support and how I can grow it to the vision that I want to grow it to. That works really well too. And we'll say, okay, you could really use a great CFO. You could use a really great COO. You could use, you should go out and buy for other companies. We can provide the financing to make that work. So really, I would say just in a nutshell, that is, if it's family founder owned, no matter what the flavor is of how you want to succeed or how you want to push that company forward to grow it, we can align and find the right plan for you and be a really good partner to make that happen. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that at the high level, the purpose is growing the business that you invest in for
Yeah.
so that your investment gets a big return or a bigger return.
Yep.
What's your ultimate goal to generate like 5%, 10%? What's your ultimate goal
Yeah.
ultimately for each investment that you make? How much return do you want?
Yeah.
Do you hope for?
Yeah. We 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 have a program at Trivest. We call it the path to 3x. The 3x is saying for every $1 that an investor gave us that we, invested into a company, we need to return $3 back to them. So at a minimum, our multiple on invested capital, or MOIC, is the acronym that you'll see for it, needs to be a 3x. We're really fortunate that sometimes you can see a return of 5x, 6x, 7, right? There have been even double digit, returns, which in the private equity world, like that is unbelievable. If you think about it, you gave me $1 and then I come back 4 years from now and say, hey, for every dollar you just gave me, here's 10 back. That's unbelievable. That is absolutely, just above market. That is something that's really, really hard to do. So 3x is a really tough number to get. And frankly, the one way that we're able to do it is we just have the right resources, the right team, and have been doing it for 40 years, that we have the expertise and to be able to go out there and do it. So hopefully that answers your question, Hope.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing you guys have been around that long. When you're thinking about businesses to invest in, what do you look for in those companies to ultimately that you think are going to be successful and generate a return?
Yeah, right. Wow, loaded question. I would say there's a few different things that we like to look at. We always like to start with the people, right? Who is the team that we're working with? How involved are they? We always talk about the airport test. If you get stranded at the airport for 5 hours with them, could you guys hang out and have a good time? Could you deal with each other that long in a stressful situation? That is a major, major component, right? And I always think of the Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger quote, you can't do a good deal with a bad person. If there's an issue in terms of values, and there's an issue in terms of just how we see the world, that's going to make for a really, really difficult investment situation for both sides, right? We just don't mesh, we don't bond together. You could have the perfect business, an incredible business that's generating a lot of cash, growing, but if we can't, make the people side of it work, it's probably going to be really hard for us to justify it in the first place. So that's one. Two is, a bit of it's a bit of a hard thing to explain, but we want to look for companies that, one, we just understand how the business works, right? It shouldn't be overcomplicated on how it makes money, on how you grow it. We should have a really clear understanding of, okay, here's how the business makes money, here's how they generate revenue, here's what the main costs are, and then in the drivers that impact the cost side of it. Can we generate a high enough margin where we're generating cash and able to reinvest in the company, right? Like those like high level financial metrics is probably going to be two. And to go along with that, there are things, we wanted to have some type of what we'll call is like a moat, right? There has to be something that's differentiating it to the point where a person just picking it up off the street couldn't come become a competitor with you overnight, right? That could look a lot of different ways. You could have, moats around a patent, or you could have moats around some type of trademark or copyright. It could be things like, hey, geography. We're the only ones in this space. We're the only ones in this geography. There just a lot of different ways that you can find that moat, and you can see that moat. The other thing I would say is customer concentration is really big for us. If you're generating $100 million and it's with one customer, that's really risky. If you lose that customer, the business basically disappears overnight. If that same $100 million is spread across, call it 100, 200 customers, okay, if you lose one of those, that's not the end of the world. Um, that's not going to fundamentally change the company's operating performance, overnight like that. So definitely having diversity in a customer base. Those are just things right off the bat that we're going to look at, and then you'll obviously really dig into the weeds on it of just, how much pending litigation, if any, is there with the company? Can we understand the financials? Are they doing accurate, bookkeeping, record keeping? You'll find, there's just some of these mom and pop businesses have, they've been a little lax on the record keeping. That's okay. That's not the end of the world for us. But if there's things going on below there that you can't really justify, again, that becomes really difficult for us to make an investment decision off of. So that's us in a high level. I mean, the best way I would summarize it is like, do you have customers that are really passionate about your product that, they find you guys reliable, you do what you say you're going to do, and it's in a space that is growing, and is starting, just to get traction and continue to build off itself. That's usually a really good recipe for success.
Coming from the other side, let's take the role of the company that is seeking an investment. How do they even find Trivest, or how does Trivest find them
Yeah.
to communicate that there is a potential opportunity there?
Yeah. No, it's a really good question. So one, I've been in the in the entrepreneur's shoes before of having to go out and raise institutional capital. It is one of those things where you read about it, it sounds so easy, and you see all the highlights of people raising $10 million, $100 million, just these massive, massive numbers. It is really, really difficult. Okay, to get the attention of these investors, I mean, you're competing against thousands, right? Tens of thousands of entrepreneurs who are sending them materials and sending them, similar opportunities constantly. Okay, so breaking through all of that noise is not an easy thing to do, right? And the best lesson I had when I went through it myself, right? And you know, from a small town in Indiana, like we did not know a lot of venture capitalists. We didn't know any private equity people. So how are we able to do it is persistence, go out there, network, meet these people, get in front of them, have the conversation. And most importantly, like when you do get that 30-second elevator pitch, like you have to have a really compelling story and some reason to justify why you should be memorable or why they should, spend more time learning about you, learning about your company. So, like I think like the easiest way to boil it down to is like when you get in that situation, okay? It has to be, why this company, okay, right? Why this product, okay? Why now? And then probably the last one, why me, right? Like you have to justify them, check each one of those boxes on, hey, this person's great. This, they're right on the cusp. They have a massive order from Walmart. They have the purchase order, but they don't have the financing for building all the inventory. This team has an understanding of how that will then spread into these SKUs or these different stores. Here's their marketing campaign of how they're going to go out and execute against it. And all they need, right, to really hit a home run here is financial backing and an investment from one of these partners. All those things start to check the boxes where they're probably no one's going to give you a yes in the room, but they're going to hear enough where they're going to come back and go, okay, like let's schedule an hour to sit down and kind of break through each one of those piece by piece. Um, so at Trivest, we have an entire business development department. On an average year, we look at about 5,000 deals, right? And when I say look at, like we sit down, analyze the industry, the actual business, the founders that are involved. We will go into deep detail on each one of those. The ones that we say yes to, out of those 5,000, we usually say yes to about 50, maybe 75.
Wow.
Okay, so it's a really, really small success rate to get through to it. So all of that pre-work that you could have done ahead of time has to be done. You're going into a really live situation where you just have to be at your best and know that, hey, as soon as this person leaves, they're going to get 50 more pitches today, and I will have had to, done something to stand out or look different to them to make them want to come back, to make them want to talk to me a little bit further. So,
Yeah.
does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. So, why you guys get all of these pitches, right? And
Yeah.
it's very small amount of pitches actually get invested in.
hmm
Why youth sport? What has opened up the door for you guys to choose to get into the youth sport industry?
Yeah. It's a really good question. And going back to like just us, we're constantly doing research, we're constantly seeing where there are really favorable trends that could really work for us. At a high level, what do we like about youth sport? One, it's a massive, massive market, right? I think anyone, has personal experience of doing youth sport when they're growing up. I mean, that's probably 99.9% of the people you talk to in some way, shape, or form. Two, I think, the parents of today, have just become more enamored, more excited with either doing it year round, either wanting to make, bigger investment, whether it's going from playing local little league, to doing a year round or a 6 month, type of travel league. Like those are very, very different in terms of the trend, in terms of the investment you'll make into the sport, into your kids. And that for us, we just see an opportunity of that growing market. I think right now, youth sport, the last I saw it was between 8 billion and 10 billion. That's a really big industry, right? Like if you get a small piece of that big pie, you can have a really, really interesting, thriving business. And so, for us, it's okay, the market is big enough for us to be there. Now, where do you play within those domains, right? So where does it check off? Somewhere I can have a moat, I can stand out, and I have a little bit of staying power relative to just another group or another, company that's in that space. So you know, I think youth sport is going to continue to grow, and the opportunity is now is to get there and start to carve out the niche, and build your market share in it, depending on which space you want to play.
Yeah. Before we get into who you've already invested in and learning
Yeah.
more about their specific organizations, where do you see
Yeah.
in the youth sport ecosystem as a whole, where do you see the biggest opportunities for growth and innovation that could potentially be investable in the future?
Yeah, we really like the programs that are going to be based around you know, some type of membership business model. So you could say like year-round coaching or like a year-round league. So like things that come to mind there immediately for me is like basketball can be year-round, dance can be year-round, cheerleading, gymnastics can be year-round. Like those places where you can come in and say, hey, as a parent, I'm going to sign my kid up. We're going to pay $200 a month, and they're going to get, 15 classes a month with expert, A+ coaching behind it that can help my, son or daughter learn their sport, learn their craft, build life skills behind it. Like that's really, really interesting to us. I know, we also like the angle of, okay, if you think about all the other ancillary industries that are around just playing the sport, you have the equipment side of it, the apparel side of it is really, really interesting. You need jerseys. You need to have warm-ups. You need to have gear for, to dress all these athletes and all these students with it. That seems like a really, really interesting place for us to play. And just as the market continues to grow, you can, continue to pick up market share as more people come into it, more people get introduced to the sport. So definitely anything that's going to be membership based, I think is going to be really interesting to us. And then two, anything that's, if everyone's digging for gold, like we want to be selling the pickaxes to them, right? So we really think about just some of those ancillary like apparel and jersey side of it is really interesting.
Okay, so what the couple of organizations that are companies that you have invested in, can you tell us about them at a high level? What do they do? And then what was it about them that you decided this would be a great opportunity for us
Yeah.
to invest
Yeah.
in?
Yeah, no, no, really good question. So right now, Trivest has two companies that are heavily focused in the youth sport industry. One is going to be Game One. Game One is the company that is going to provide any type of apparel, any type of equipment in when you think middle school, high school, youth sports, Game One is going to be the provider of that. So that could be anything from cheerleading uniforms to basketball jerseys, baseball jerseys, football jerseys, helmets, shoulder pads, you name it, right? Like that is going to be that business. And on top of it, it's not just providing a blank jersey. Like we'll do the, as we call it, the decorating, right? We can put the names on the back, use any of the logos, get really crazy with some of the designs and some of the, some of the different ways that people want to see it. There's almost like an arms race in that world of like who can have the craziest, most unique jerseys. I'm sure we've all seen it and experienced it. So that is going to be Game One, for sure. We basically have relationships from coast to coast with athletic directors, high school coaches, club coaches, you name it, right? Like we have really, really good ties in that space. And it's all about how can we get the right equipment for you. If you want a Nike product, an Adidas product, Under Armour, we can make that happen. And then, you're limited by your creativity on, the combination permutations of how crazy you want those jerseys to look. So that is Game One. The other business that we have invested in is the Dominic Dawes Gymnastics Academy. What we like about that is, first and foremost, I mean, Dominic Dawes, gold medalist, 1996 Olympics, incredible, just ambassador for the sport, and then also just an incredible influencer and personality in general. So one, partnering up, having the ability to partner up with someone like that, I think is just a slam dunk in so many ways. And then you actually get into the business and see how they're operating it. As much as we wish everyone is going to turn out to be a gold medalist or be an Olympian level athlete, the percentages just tell us that that's not necessarily going to happen. That's not necessarily going to be the case. The life lessons you learn from being committed to a sport like that and learning a discipline like gymnastics, can apply to you, for the rest of your life in terms of just, how you approach perseverance, how you have, self-discipline, work ethic, being a good teammate, like all of those things are to be seen in gymnastics. And then I would say, for those that are focused on, well, how does that make me be better, at another sport that I'm competing in? Learning that type of body control, learning that type of athleticism is only going to be beneficial to you down the road. So, the Dominic Dawes side of it really checked a lot of boxes for us, just on all that place. And then again, you know the story, the personalities behind it. It's a slam dunk. And I will say, having worked with that team hand in hand, they have lived up to that, across the board. Everything I said there, from just their CEO, how they treat people, how they're really intentional about hiring people, and then most importantly, how they work with the student athletes, how they work with the parents, on taking them through and growing, within the sport has been really awesome, really rewarding to see.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, private equity, we know, is one of the largest growing aspects of the youth sport ecosystem.
Yeah,
So, how, as someone that is
yeah,
focused on getting a return, how do we balance getting the return of the investment while also making sure that we're still providing a great experience for the kids? As someone who's been in
yeah,
youth sport, who has kids that I'm sure will be in youth sport, how do we
yeah,
balance that? How do we balance those two kind of mission focused goals?
yeah. It's a great question, right? And I think, probably the question within the question is like, well, how do you balance the short-term thinking versus the long-term thinking? Because you can do things in the short term that are going to help you have a better return on investment. They can help you generate more cash, and do all the things that are going to be great for the, next 2 to 3 years, but are going to be awful for the next 10 to 20. The best way I've heard it put, with one of our partners at Trivest, he had said we need to do the thing for the business as if we weren't going to sell the business, and I think that just really encapsulates we need to be long-term thinking, right? Like this is not about, a one-time cash grab. It's not about taking an asset, and then just flipping it, for a financial engineered return, right? And so like, to bring that back to, game one and the Dominic Dawes Gymnastics Academy, it's how, what are we doing for our customers first and foremost? How are we making sure that we're alleviating their existing pain points? How are we making sure that we're getting ahead of their pain points before they even know they have that issue, right? And so like the one we had, with Dominic Dawes, lately, we were coming up into camp season, which is heavily focused on the summers. You can imagine for parents who have, little kids, right? Think 5 to 6 years old. It's not easy to get them signed up for camps and to have all that coordinated, and it's very easy to miss a deadline. So we've gone through and we've been really intentional about engineering. How do we make sure we have something in place for people who are last minute signups, maybe for people who just missed the deadline, and make sure that that experience they get is the same as someone who signed up 2 weeks ahead of time. That's not an easy thing to do operationally. And conventional wisdom would say, well, you have to have a hard cutoff, just say this is the end of it. That would be a great short-term solution, but you can imagine, as you, the parent, says, oh my gosh, I missed the deadline by 24 hours, and now you're penalizing me for the entire camp season. That's brutal, right? Like that is not a good customer outcome from it. And so we've tried to take it and say, look, like happen if we're going to stick by our customers and we're going to stick by our athletes, this is the best decision for them. And so that's not always easy to make, but I think if you do that consistently over time, you're going to build a really high customer satisfaction, a really high trust rate with those groups that they're going to come back to you, right? They're going to tell their friends about it. And you're going to help build a really strong business over a 10-year period rather than just making a call that would have only benefited the next 12 months,
Yeah.
right? So something we're always trying to be really intentional about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Looking at the trends in youth sport, we know that NIL is here to stay in the college world,
Gosh.
and we're even
Yeah.
starting to see it trickle down into youth sport. What does that mean for private equity? I mean, I know it's a little early to talk about it in the youth sport realm. What does that mean,
Yeah.
though? Like, do you foresee maybe opportunities in the future that private equity could get involved in NIL at the youth sport level? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I do think it is a very real possibility. Now, for the record, Trivest is I'm not speaking on our behalf. We are not looking in that space, and I can never say never. So it's just something that's out of my day to day to really like opine from a Trivest point of view. What I would say, just from like a general someone who can appreciate the trends, if private equity sees a way to make a return, it's going to get their attention. And what we know about college sports, college athletics is it is probably the most lucrative it's ever been in its history. If you look at just like the broadcast deal numbers, if you look at the sponsorship aspects to it, you're talking billions upon billions of dollars in just the college side, not even to mention what happens when they go into a professional setting or an Olympic setting, about the brands and in the how the individuals translate to that next level, right? And so, if there is a way for private equity to make an investment and then say, okay, well then how can we get the next Michael Jordan? How can we get the next Tiger Woods to go through our program? How can we get, a feeder system, right? Where we're stacking the deck with the absolute, stars upon stars across our entire team. If that is proven to how you then get fan engagement and to how translate sponsorship dollars and increase the value of the team, then NIL will be, just something that is a big line item on everyone's budget, and they will happily fund it to the maximum degree that you can possibly see. To a large extent, you're seeing that at universities that are, so not inside the private equity world, but universities are figuring out ways to really activate their alumni base to go out and say, how do we, make sure that we're investing in, the football team? How are you investing in the basketball team? And, you name the sport, about how do we get the best athletes possible, make sure that there's a monetary side of it that becomes really lucrative. I mean, private equity does that better than anyone, right? So it's just only a matter of time where they can figure out the right way to get into it and justify and ensure that they have a path into to how they get those returns behind it. So if it's not here already, it's coming. It's very,
It, I have a feeling it's coming. I have a feeling
yeah,
that, we're already seeing some high school students get some big NIL deals. And I think with the ranking websites and those could really be fueled by a lot of NIL
yeah,
opportunities. So we're already seeing it. We're already seeing a lot of talk around it. I think it's just a couple years away, I think, until it starts to really
yeah.
trickle down. All right, now knowing what you know now, working with these couple of youth sport organizations, what's something that you know now about the youth sport ecosystem or the youth sport industry that you probably didn't know or realize in college?
Yeah. I would say, with those groups is the thing I really appreciate is like, you want to do it for all the right sentimental reasons. And again, as someone who played sports, from kindergarten all the way through college, right? Like there is a lot of sentimental value around being around your friends, being around great coaches, having your parents be a part of it. Like all of that stuff is the incredible things that you get from youth sports and probably the things you miss the most once you're outside of sport, right? The life lessons that you learn from it are there 100%. The hard part, for a business owner that's getting into this space is you have to balance those two, right? You can't treat this like a hobby, right? You have to be able to say, listen, we want to give the best possible experience, but we also have to appreciate that we got to pay rent, like we got to pay insurance behind this, right? Like there are real costs on top of just the time commitment that we have to balance out in here. And that's one place I think I've learned more of just having gone through it is, you know, if you run it just with purely that hobby mindset that's going into it, like you're gonna burn out. And I think the ability to really build something into the vision that you want to see is gonna be next to impossible that side of it. And so, if you can find a way to balance the two. If you can find a way to preserve those really strong elements behind it, have the diehard fans, have the diehard parents, that want to build it on there. Make sure that it's a means to how you stay around and how you grow that you can share it across more people, and touch more athletes, touch more, events, and again, just have a bigger impact by the time it's all said and done.
I love that. I love that vision. I want you to
Hmm.
take a minute and jump into the lives of you as a college student, thinking about what your college experience was like, and thinking about if you could speak to yourself um, with the knowledge that you have now, what would you tell yourself about working in private equity, specifically with the youth sport focus? Like, what should college Jamie be working on to be successful where you are now?
Yeah. No, it's a really good question. And honestly, like looking back to being in college now, like it's night to day different in terms of just how much things have changed. When I was going through it in college, you could be kicked off the team for getting like a free appetizer from a booster at an Applebee's. Like that would be like considered capital punishment in terms of like how strict the rules were back then. And now, like what are we talking about? We're talking about high school kids getting six-figure plus NIL deals. Like that is just wild how different the world has changed in such a short period of time. Um, the, you know, just thinking like just like general advice that I would give is, I always like think of like it's going to be harder than you thought and it's going to take longer than you think it's going to take, right? But you just can't give up, right? You have to constantly pursue it. It has to be a constant grind. How are we going to get better? How are we going to make that? How are we going to improve this? And you know, there you'll learn a lot of like complicated ways to run these companies. You'll hear of like the newest and greatest metrics and newest and latest and greatest, marketing campaigns or growth hacks that come into this. I think at the end of the day, like this stuff's really simple. Like we need to produce a product, right? And sell it for more than it costs us to make. If we can do that, we've got a chance, right? Like it doesn't have to be any more complicated. And the more you default to doing what is the best outcome for the customer, what's the best outcome for our athletes, what's the best outcome for, the teams that we're working with, if you have that as your North Star, right, and don't ignore the other things, you're gonna be just fine. You are gonna be just fine. And if you're doing this with a passion, if you're doing this in an excitement of what you can build and again, the lives you can impact just on a greater scale, and it's not focused on we want to win a state championship, we want to win rings or blue ribbons, stuff like that. Like I think you've set yourself up to have a really impactful career and have a really impactful company.
Yeah, I love that. When thinking about the students that are listening to this right now, what skills could they be working on right now that's going to help them in their career in 5, 10, 20 years?
Yeah, I, I really think if you boil down my job and most jobs in general, it comes down to two things. It comes down to sales and it comes down to psychology, right? Like you have to be really good at selling yourself. You have to be really good at, just selling the product, selling the company, selling the vision, like sales, 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 whether you like it or not. Like that is just a part of how the world works, right? And so get really good at that sooner rather than later. And then on the psychology side, like, you have to have an appreciation for the different competing motives that people have on their side, right? And so the more you can get in that psychology mindset of like, okay, they're saying this, but what do they really mean? Like, is this really the truth, or is there more to the story that I have to think about, that I have to justify, I have to get around to it? Um, you know, so if you're focused on sales, you're focused on psychology, you're building, your skill set around each of those. I think you're going to be in a really, really good place. And then I always like this quote from our CEO at Trivest, like, listen, at the end of the day, victory belongs to the most tenacious. So if you're persistent, right, you're tenacious towards the goal, you're getting better every single day. It may be harder than you thought. It may take longer than you thought it was going to take, but you'll get there, right? Just keep going.
Love it. Love it. Okay. Before we get into rapid fire questions, is there anything about private equity, youth sport, Game One, and Dominique Dawes, like anything that you think that we haven't touched on that you think would be important for our students to know?
Uh, I think we covered it. I can't think of anything, honestly.
Okay. Okay. Jamie's lost for words. I did it. He's
Tell me.
speechless.
Nice.
Okay, are you ready for these rapid fire questions to end it out?
I'll try my best.
All
Sure.
all right, here we go. Get your brains on. All right, what's your most memorable moment in your career?
Professional career, you're talking like sports career, which
Whatever you want to make that.
uh I don't yeah. I know it's supposed to be rapid fire, but this is a good one. Um Most memorable moment in my career. Okay, I've got one. All right, most memorable moment for me was I started a company with four buddies in a dorm room, and we had no business having the success that we had. We had no business growing to the company that we grew it to. And I think the surrealist moment, the most memorable, was we were filming an episode of a TV show we were making, and Tony Hawk came to be in it. As a kid who grew up playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater on PlayStation 2, and PlayStation 1, to have Tony Hawk standing there, right? Like your idol, and to say it's not only cool to meet your idol, but to have your idol go, I want to come and see the cool thing that you guys are working on, that will never be surpassed. Like that is far and away number one.
There you
So,
go.
so
Love
meeting
it.
Tony Hawk easily.
Love it.
That was longer than you wanted, but
No, I
still.
love it. I love it. What do you consider your greatest success of your career so far?
Greatest success of my career. I think the best is yet to come. What
Love it.
what I would say is, have been in some really cool situations. The great thing has been getting to go through it with, my girlfriend at the time, fiance, now wife, right? Having to get to share that experience with your spouse, and then now getting to the point where you get to share it with your kids, right? I think that's been really cool, is like to have the balance of both of those worlds kind of intersecting, has been really, really neat and really, really rewarding.
Right there with you. Right there with you.
You're with it. You get it.
Yeah. um, okay. I think our students often see the highs of careers, but they don't often get to see the failures or the lessons that have been learned from them. So, was there a failure that you had in your career what did you learn from it?
Yeah, really good question. I mean, look, like we all do this to a degree as we compare our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. And so like, yeah, I know for me, I've got to do some really interesting, cool things, but man, like no one was there when I'm working, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on a Saturday and a Sunday, by myself, right? Like there is a lot of things that go on behind the scenes. That one is just it's hard to do, and like frankly, for you to get to some of those highlights, you have to go through them. There's also setbacks, right? Like I've been in a position where we were the team that got let go, right? We thought we were great, we thought we were doing the right thing, we were let go. Been in positions where I expected to get a resounding yes, and it was going to be this great partnership, only to have it fall apart and end up in a no. At the end of the day, you have to have a short memory to a degree. You have to just battle back from it, and like I said before, like okay, like this is just part of the journey. Every single no is one step closer to the next yes. So try to balance it that way.
Put that on a t-shirt.
There you go. There you go.
Okay. How was your personal, because you're a star athlete, on the field. How has your
This is my
personal
guy.
experience in youth sport informed your work
Yeah.
now, especially as it relates to your work in youth sport?
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. So, have definitely been in a position where you grew up going through youth sports. I think I've benefited from coaching, in not just like general coaching. Like you want to be coached hard, right? Like I want to be coached hard. I want that feedback. I want the truth. I want to be held accountable. I think all of those things have been informed by having gone through youth sport. And I would say the other thing too, is getting to not only see it from like your local competitive, field, but seeing it on a national and even international level, and really reorienting yourself from a young age of that's what good looks like. You may be fast, you may be good in your tiny little ecosystem of your town. Go to a national event, go to an international event, see what other kids look like that are really at the elite level. It just reorients yourself of like, okay, this is where I'm at. Here's how I stack up. How can I get better? Right? How can I drive to be a part of that? I think those are great lessons I learned at a really young age, applied to me now, and yeah, totally embrace those and better off for them.
That's awesome. All right, last question. The best question, my favorite, is who is your
Oh
favorite coach
man,
of all time?
yeah. I don't. This is a tough. So it's not a tough one. Greg Smith, easily. Greg Smith, best coach I ever had. The amount of lessons, the amount of like benefits I think from that are limitless. But I would say it comes down to two things, right? And these are great gifts that cost nothing to give. And I know I got both of them from Greg, excuse me. Believed in me and then held me accountable, right? If you believe in someone and you hold them accountable, it may not be fun for that person, right? Hold them to that higher standard to push them to higher they need to go. But my gosh, like what a great gift, to give to people. costs nothing to do it, and very few actually go the extra mile to go out there and do it. And so I was really fortunate and really lucky to have that. And so I hope to one day repay the favor.
Yeah, for those of us, or for those of our students that don't know, tell us who Greg Smith is to you. How do you know him?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I met Greg through middle school. He was a middle school science teacher, was a football coach, wrestling coach for us. And so yeah, we had a lot of years working with him as just that coach player relationship. But I mean, it was year round, right? We went to summer sports camps together, you name it. And so I even got to be really fortunate where when I was working in Chicago, he'd come in and he'd visit, get to introduce him to that next series of life, that next phase of life that you were in. And then most recently, so Greg has passed away. Got to go and took his kids on a golf trip with us, which was really, really cool. Just for, getting to share with them of like, I remember how much your dad did for me, and I need you to know I never forgot it.
Yeah.
Right. And so just a small gesture in that way to
Yeah.
him. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's Greg in a nutshell.
Yeah. What I love about that question is, when people talk about their favorite coach of all time, you would think that it would be someone at a really, really high level. And 95% of our interviewees have said a youth sport coach, which brings it back to why do we
100%.
do what we do, of like
Yeah.
the impact that youth sport has on the lives of the kids and the athletes in our communities is so important, and to keep that focus. So, Jamie, you're awesome. Thank you so much for your time today and sharing your
Yeah.
unique insight into private equity and how that relates to the growing world of youth sport. I'm so appreciative. Thank you so much.